Just joining, I'm getting started here, ready to kind of go live. So I'm waiting here for everything to go live and then we will get going here. So this is maybe not working here. All right, looks like we are live. So, hey everybody, good evening. Today is the 23rd of December. So, we are right up against Christmas. Hope you've got all your Christmas shopping done. And we're getting ready to go live here with today's topics. We'll talk about a bunch of stuff, but before we get started, we are almost at the end of the quarter. So, as all of you know, my name is Donna Imam. I'm running for U.S. Congress in Texas's 37th district. This is a brand new district in Austin, Texas. And every Thursday at 7 p.m. Central Time, I do this live stream. And of course, you can always join me on Twitter Spaces, 9 p.m. Central Time on Mondays. And we have an open discussion with anybody who wants to join and share their opinions or, share what they think the trajectory of our country should be, or want to share their story. Or maybe you have a suggestion on how we should conduct policy to solve some of our biggest challenges. So we do that Monday nights, 9 p.m. Central Time. So let's get started. What are we going to cover today? We want to cover the Build Back Better. That was the big news that everybody talked about all through Sunday and Monday and Tuesday. And it was all about Build Back Better and how it will now be pushed to 2022. So nothing is set to pass. Congress is out on break. That's not going to happen. So we'll talk about really what happened there and, what we can do now going forward into 2022. The other big news that broke right after that is the shortage of testing, COVID testing, because of the cases of the Omicron variant all over the United States. Unfortunately, testing has become a big deal. And so we'll talk about what's happening on the shortage and why that's a challenge for us and, of course, is a concern. Then there was the big student loan pause. So remember, student loans were supposed to be supposed to restart February 1st. And there was a lot of conversation, obviously, because this has been paused for many, many months now because of the pandemic, but it's supposed to resume on February 1st, 2022. And that has now been temporarily paused. We'll talk about that and the real problem behind student loans. And we'll end with the Kellogg deal. There's lots of good news there, but sometimes we have these things that happen in the news, we follow them, we see a good result, and then we kind of move on with our lives. But the people who have to deal with the everyday fallout of what happens behind the scenes, the nitty gritty, sometimes often continue to live their version of reality, which is not necessarily the version that we see on the news. So I'll go into what really happened in that Kellogg deal and why it's not as, unfortunately, as great as we want it to be. So starting off with what happened with the Build Back Better. So Sunday morning, news broke that Senator Manchin was a no on the Build Back Better. Now, that apparently came as a surprise to a lot of the media because they made a big deal about it for at least 48 hours. But I think most Democrats were, they knew that Manchin had a lot of reservations. Now, we knew that the Build Back Better was gutted in a big way. So definitely, we didn't expect really good news. We expected to be further gutted in the Senate, even if we were hopeful of, certain things becoming better inside the Build Back Better. I think the reality is that most people realize that if it did go to the Senate, it would probably face further scrutiny. Now, here's the interesting thing about Build Back Better. Prior to that, it was coupled with what's called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, which was commonly known as BIF, Bipartisan Infrastructure Framework. Now, the interesting thing is both Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema got exactly what they wanted in that infrastructure deal. And when it came to the House Democrats really didn't make any effort to negotiate any of the aspects of that bill. It was basically signed on the dotted line as is. There was an opportunity for House Democrats, for example, to negotiate parts of that to make it better for the American people, because there are parts of the infrastructure bill that can be or are problematic. But they didn't take that. Instead, what they did was they held the Build Back Better bill up. They held the infrastructure bill up, hoping to get the Build Back Better passed in the Senate. And when that didn't happen, they eventually relented, and we ended up, getting the original BIF without any kind of negotiation, as well as no Build Back Better at all whatsoever. So it happened to be a lose-lose situation in the House, unfortunately, because passing a bill in the House doesn't mean anything. You can pass bills all day long in the House if you have a majority. Of course, the majority in the House is very slim. So, passing a bill is not that simple. But nevertheless, Build Back Better passed in the House, even though it wasn't perfect and to everybody's liking. But when it got in the Senate, it died. Whereas the bipartisan infrastructure bill, remember, Manchin and Sinema got everything that they wanted. There's very little incentive for them to pass Build Back Better, given that they started out being very much against it. So what does that really mean? Remember, when it went into the Senate, it was gutted significantly. Their Medicaid expansion was cut down in a big way, right? Lowering prescription drug prices cut down in a big way. You couldn't negotiate all drug prices, only certain drug prices with certain limitations. And so there were some good parts in there, but the majority of it was gutted in a really huge way. Paid leave gutted completely. It was down to 4 weeks and then nothing. Tuition-free community college gutted. Immigration gutted. So it left a very, very simple and light framework of BBB was in there. And the real question was that good enough to motivate people to come out? I think looking at this, we really need to make a case in the Senate, and House Democrats need to join with the Senate to figure out how do we actually get this passed, and can we bring others over onto this to get this bill passed? What are some strategic initiatives? What do we have in our hands to be able to use to apply leverage to be able to get some of this passed for the American people? Some of the good bits of Build Back Better were taken out. So the enthusiasm, even for a very cut down, slimmed down Build Back Better, is obviously very low among Democrats and the American people. So that's kind of where we are with Build Back Better right now. Obviously, nothing will pass in 2021. Now, can something pass in 2022? Possibly. It will very much depend on the White House being able to apply pressure, the White House working with Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema and the Senate to be able to make any impact. So we'll have to see what happens there. As I mentioned, the big news this week was testing shortage. So what happened? We saw President Biden make an announcement about a day ago regarding that he has promised 500 million test at home, or home tests rather, that would be basically shipped to the American people to their homes. Now, a lot of people have pointed out that 500 million sounds like a lot, but it's actually less than 2 per person, 330 million approximately, give or take, Americans. So you don't even get 2 per. And of course, how often do you test? How quickly do you run out of them? But the bigger problem is that there is a manufacturing shortage. So there's really not contracts ready to go, and it's going to be weeks before these tests are actually available. That's one of the biggest things. And if you look at the headlines around testing, you will see over and over again that there is a national shortage of COVID-19 tests. They're talking about DC. There's a lot of anxiety as the United States grapples with a shortage of tests. Where are the rapid COVID tests? You can see headline after headline. Central Ohio, COVID take-home test shortage frustrates Ohio residents. And then the headlines continue. All anybody wants for Christmas is a COVID test. Really, here in New York, COVID testing shortage. And of course, Walgreens and CVS limit purchases of at-home COVID tests. So even if you wanted to spend $25 to go get 2 at-home tests, you're limited, and in many areas, they're not available at all. In addition to that, we heard about long lines as people lined up to get tested all around the country. So that's headline after headline after headline regarding long lines, which greeted people as they wanted to get tested for the virus, basically. And it was all the way from Houston to New York to everywhere around the country. You saw the same sort of headlines. Now, The real question that people were asking about is, why do COVID rapid tests cost so much, especially in the United States? And so there was a really good article about this that came out actually earlier in 2021, where they actually talk about the fact that we're paying close to $15 per unit, $25 for two. This is a very common price in the United States, anywhere between $10 to $15, right, for for each test. Whereas if you go and look at what are the prices around the world, they say that in Germany, grocery stores sell rapid tests for under $1 a piece. So they can be available quite inexpensive. And of course, Canada is doing free rapid tests to businesses where you can just go in and request tests and the government will ship them to you. In the UK, provides 14 tests per person, free of charge. So we're talking about less than 2 tests for Americans around the country, whereas there's 14 in the UK. So you can see sort of the disparity between the availability of testing in the United States and around the world. Now, President Biden today was asked by PBS NewsHour whether he considers this a failure and whether he thinks that they should have done more about it. And his answer was, "Look, we didn't really anticipate the Omicron variant, and we have been working towards this. The fact is, we have ordered it. It's going to take a little bit of time." And that was his response to it. With respect to vaccines, he encouraged everyone to get vaccines. But here's the thing. If you want to tackle something like this, which has obviously upended everybody's lives, not just in the United States, but across the world, it is really important for us to use every single tool in our toolbox. And that includes testing. It includes therapeutics. It includes early care. It includes home care. If you get a light version of COVID, how do you take care of yourself? What are the processes and procedures? What can you do to recover from this quickly, even if it's at home? How do you take care of yourself to prevent yourself going to the hospital if you have a breakthrough case, for example? So testing, contact, tracking who you've been in contact with, for example, as well as therapeutics, as well as early treatment. All of these are tools that we should have used back in 2020. And this is something that I've been talking about since 2020, since President Trump was in office, who also basically talks about, the fact that he was instrumental in bringing this vaccine to the market at warp speed. But you'd never heard President Trump actually talk about all the other tools. And this has been, missing for a long time. We did see the first sort of, at-home pill for COVID come out this week. But the bottom line is therapeutics was not a focus. Testing was not a focus. Contact tracing was not a focus. And these are all tools that we should have used from the very beginning, knowing that variants were sort of unavoidable. So let's talk about the student loan pause. So as you know, during the pandemic, people who had student loans were basically told that they could pause their payments, meaning that they didn't have to pay their student loans while the pandemic, we were kind of bearing the brunt of the pandemic, specifically because many people had lost their jobs, couldn't make those payments. Now, in early December or mid-December, the Biden administration basically came out and said, February 1st, you will start making payments again. And then you saw all over social media people posting the screenshots of their email coming from their student loan companies and federal student loan bodies telling them that to get ready to pay in February. Now, of course, people push back on that in a big way, because not really because they have to pay it, because they've been paying this for a long time, but because many people, in fact, tens of thousands of people across this country have such major student loans that they're unable to basically get out from under them, even after they have fully paid off the original amount that they took out plus a lot of interest, but they still have tens of thousands of dollars still left to pay on loans that they took out, in some cases decades ago. A lot of us believe that the student loan debt issue is a young people problem, but I have met people right here in my district that are over 60, that are over 50, that have large student loans that they've been paying their entire lives and still not been able to pay off. There's another class of student loan takers who not only took student loans for themselves, but are now taking a second student loan or helping their children take a student loan or co-signing for a student loan for their children. So imagine being an adult, having a student loan of yourself that you haven't paid off, and now your daughter or son or child that's going to college needs a student loan, and now you have to co-sign for that, taking on an extra burden because of the situation with respect to college. So the real problem about student loan is not just about being able to pay it back, but it's about being able to just afford to go to college. So even if, for example, President Biden indefinitely paused student loans for an indefinite amount of time, you still have the problem of people who are going to college right now or thinking about going to college, right? They still have to take out loans. So the real problem is that the cost of college over the past several decades has really gone up exponentially. Here's an article that says it jumped 55% in a decade. So think about that. Has your income jumped 55% in a decade? Probably not. This is quite difficult for people to imagine. This is one of the biggest challenges that people have, is that the cost of college or higher education of any kind is really, really expensive. If you look at another news that's by US News, you'll see here they've done a little plot over the last sort of 20 years, from 2002 to 2022, that's next year. And they've showed the growth of the cost of tuition with private universities versus out of state. So if you're just going to another university in a state that you're not from, and of course in state. And you can see how just between 2002 and 2022, the cost of college, average tuition and fees at a private national university has jumped 144%. If you look at out-of-state tuition and fees at public national universities, they've risen 171%. And in-state tuition fees at public national universities has grown almost to 211%. That is where the crux of the problem is. The problem is not so much about taking out loans, but that the cost of college is growing at a pace that absolutely makes no sense with respect to what is happening in terms of education. Take into account this. Universities are not rebuilding their campuses every year or every 10 years or even every 20 years. University professors do not have salaries that are going up by 211%, nor are they getting millions and millions of dollars as salaries. In fact, if you look at university professor pay at public universities, they may be adjusted somewhat for inflation, but the growth in their salaries are minimal. So the real problem here is that the cost of college is just out of control, and there's no really good reason to explain that. The focus here should be lowering the cost of college, making it completely debt-free, and lowering the cost down to nothing with respect to what college students can earn while they're going to university or even working part-time jobs, etc., which is how majority of people who went to college 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago were able to do. They were able to work over the summer and really subsidize their college education in a big, significant way. That is no longer possible. So there's a lot of people that also make the case that not everybody needs to go to college. It's not important. We should have really good jobs right out of high school that are attainable for everybody, that are high wage jobs. The answer to that is, first of all, those don't exist because many of those jobs have been shipped outside of our country, and we're now basically getting that very low wages outside of the United States, number one. Number two, the manufacturing jobs and sort of lower skilled, quote unquote, non-college jobs that are coming back to the United States often require specialized training, some ability to program complicated devices and manufacturing equipment inside these manufacturing plants. They require you to sometimes go get certification or take a 6-week course at a community college. Now, community college happens to be college. So this is why 2-year tuition-free community college, which was in the Build Back Better, which was one of the proposals that got yanked from Build Back Better when it passed in the House. So it never even made it to the Senate. That is so important because there are literally tens of thousands of people in this country who went to community college or went to college, did not complete their degree, but have enormous debt because they had to drop out and go work. For whatever reasons, there's a lot of tragic situations people face, reality, and they have to do this. This is why it is important for us to cover the cost of education. One is you need it for even jobs that don't need a full college degree. So for example, you can go and get go 2 semesters, for example, take 6 classes, and that would be considered college costs because you're going to community college and taking specific classes to be certified to be able to get a high wage skilled job, even though that is not a college degree. It's not an associate's degree. It's not a 2-year degree. It is not a 4-year degree, but you still have to take loans to cover it if you don't have the money to pay for it. So all of this boils down to one thing, which is pausing student loan debt for just 3 months from February through May, which is what President Biden is doing, is definitely very welcome. It's extremely welcome, but it is not enough. We must lower the cost of education down to nothing. And that is, that is where our focus should be when it comes to education, in addition to removing or forgiving, the enormous amount of debt, the $1.8 trillion of debt that Americans collectively owe right now, which is extremely difficult to imagine, but it is $1.8 trillion. So we end today with the Kellogg Deal. So as you know, I reported last time and been reporting about strikes around the country. We saw what happened with the John Deere employees, union workers who basically were on strike. And then they were able to come to a positive conclusion to that and go back to work. We also saw this with Kellogg's union members. After 11 weeks, nearly a 3-month strike, the members ratified a new contract. Now, a lot of good positive things were actually reported in this contract, saying that workers were able to get everything that they demanded. And one of the things that they were negotiating was a 2-tier system of employees, meaning people who had been a union member and at Kellogg's for a certain amount of time would have a different salary and different benefits. So they would have a higher hourly salary as well as healthcare coverage, whereas people coming in later on would not be allowed to get on that contract and they would be paid much, much lower, even though they were doing the exactly same job for the exactly, same company and putting the exact same number of hours in with and meeting the same scheduling requirements, which are sometimes horrendous in these types of workspaces. But however, that was something that was told that was eliminated, and they'd come to a conclusion that they'd gotten everything that they negotiated. In fact, even I was very happy to see that unions work and that we even needed them in this day and age, and they were actually accomplishing things for working Americans. However, the local news here in Battle Creek is reporting right now that some Battle Creek Kellogg workers feel very much betrayed by their new union deal. And this is what's they're talking about, that even though the entire negotiation was ending the 2-tier contract system, that they've still kept in this new contract legacy workers that make somewhere around apparently $33 an hour and get full health insurance. It's a different tier than workers who come in later. We're making as little as $19 an hour and basically having to pay for their own health insurance. So they wanted to create a case where that wasn't, that was gone away. So if you go look in here, the other challenge that they faced was over the strike. It says some cereal plant workers said the strike cost them more than $20,000 in lost wages. So sure, after 11 weeks of striking, they did get an agreement. The agreement was not fully to their satisfaction, saying the labor agreement was not what workers were fighting for. And it says here that I feel the person next to me should make what I make. It's a way to divide and conquer, says Teddy Haywood, a union worker. The labor agreement still included that two-tier pay system that picketers in Battle Creek fought to end for the past 11 weeks. And according to the company website, workers will have a path to the first tier after 4 years to get more money and better benefits. The point is they wanted this two-tier system completely eliminated, but it hasn't been fully eliminated. The end of it all is often we see these strikes in the news. We see contracts being negotiated by unions, and when they win, we feel a sense of happiness that they were able to accomplish something. And in this case, they were able to get a contract in place that majority of the workers agreed to. However, those workers that are not in this, tier one per se, that will have a path to first tier after 4 years, they go home, the news dies away, but they still have to live with the reality of much lower wages and having to cover their own health care. And the majority of us will watch the news, we will move on feeling happy, but the people who actually have to live it on a day-to-day basis, have to experience this, have a completely different reality. And that is one of the most important things. When you see on social media, you'll see someone state a situation and another person saying, oh, that's not wrong because, that's not accurate because I'm not experiencing the exact same things. We have to understand across our 50 states, depending on whether you live in urban areas or rural areas, that our experiences, our ability to get healthcare coverage, to be ability to find housing that we can afford that is in line with our pay, the ability to live where we work and be able to put a down payment on a home, to live that American dream, to be able to get the education that we need, even if it is not a 4-year college degree, even if we want to go to trade school, even if we want to get certification, even if we just want to go take some classes, so that we can get a better paying job. Those experiences are different across this country. And unless you've had that exact same experiences, we often do not realize what our fellow Americans are going through. The bottom 50% of our country is struggling to get by on a day-to-day basis. Right now, because the Build Back Better will not be extended, or hasn't passed rather, that means that the child tax credit, for example, expires in December. The last child tax credit paychecks went out in December. If Build Back Better didn't pass by December 28th, and we're 5 days away from December 28th, with absolutely no way that BBB will pass based on the fact that Congress is out, there is no path to the child tax credit in January. So if the child tax credit indeed did lower poverty and food insecurity and child hunger in many, many families, I saw figures of up to 40%. It cut child poverty by 40%. If that is indeed true, then we are back to square one come January. And these are the things that Americans in the top half of our country may not experience the exact same as the Americans in the bottom half of our country. And because all of us work for a living and create all the wealth in our country, it is important that we those of us who don't experience that listen to other Americans in the bottom half of our country. And with that, I want to wish you happy holidays, a very Merry Christmas, and I hope you get to take some time off, relax, and spend time with your family and friends, those that make you happy, and get some well needed rest for all of us. And I hope you enjoy this break. And in 2022, let's come together and make these things happen for the American people. There's a lot more work to do. And of course, as you know, our race is coming up 6 weeks after the new year. Early voting starts in our race. So if you can support us, please donate, please volunteer. Let's get involved. Let's make these things happen, because it is extremely clear that we need people in Congress that are going to advocate, that are going to influence, that are going to bring together the caucus to get things accomplished. Americans want to see solutions. They want to see Congress people that are going to deliver results, deliver on their promises, versus coming up with excuses of why things can't be done. So with that, I want to thank you for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful Christmas and break. And I will see you on Monday, 9 p.m.